Le ministre de la Justice américain a fait des promesses, on en parlait tout à l'heure. Est-ce que vous croyez qu'un procès honnête pour vous est possible aux États-Unis?
I've been working very hard with my lawyers for quite some time now, since 2013, to try to get reliable guarantees of a fair trial in the United States. But unfortunately, the Department of Justice in the United States has been unwilling to agree or to make any kind of sort of agreements in that regard. The only thing they have said at this point was that they would not execute me, which I think that's something that would make everyone feel a little bit more comfortable if they heard it. But that's not quite the same thing as agreeing to a fair and open trial. We don't want secret presentations of evidence. We don't want secret witnesses. We don't want secret interpretations of law. And on these points, the government hasn't really been willing to compromise or discuss them that way.
Vous avez toujours dit « Je suis un patriote ». Est-ce que vous voulez retourner aux États-Unis? Est-ce que le but pour vous est de retourner aux États-Unis?
Absolutely. I've said this consistently because for me, patriotism is not a question of love for government. Patriotism is about loving your country. Patriotism is about loving your people and trying to do what's best for them, and to remember that it's not about agreeing that your government is right no matter what decisions they make, because governments are often wrong. And people who truly love their country, people who truly support their country, are the ones who stand up and say when things are going wrong, and they try to put them right. So, yes, it's not that I've ever sought to be anti-American or bring down my government. I don't think that's appropriate. And even in foreign countries as well. There were some discussions, for example, in Switzerland about investigating the policies and programs of sort of the NSA and the CIA and their activities in Switzerland, many of which at this point are known to have broken the law. But these decisions in Switzerland often have to come from the level of the Federal Council. It's a political decision. They have to agree not to interfere with the case, which unfortunately in some previous CIA incidents did not happen. They did interfere with the administration of sort of an independent pursuit of justice, what the federal prosecutor sought to do. But that doesn't mean, allowing an independent investigation of criminal activities, even if they're only suspected, is not to be anti-American or anti-Chinese or whoever is the accused. And to be fair and to recognize that laws are important, that a fair playing field is important, and that we can't, even in the case of great powers, allow one sort of superstate, one great power, to play by different rules from all of the other states. When we start creating exceptions in that regard, particularly in the context of violations of rights, violations of laws, even in neutral countries, we're creating a very dangerous playing field that I think is contrary to the interests not only of Switzerland, but to the world.
En Suisse, vous avez compris beaucoup de choses. Vous montrez aussi à quel point la Suisse était une plaque tournante pour le renseignement, pour la surveillance de masse. C'est toujours le cas?
It is. I mean, I don't have current classified information, of course. I no longer work there, but the things that made Switzerland so interesting as sort of an espionage capital, particularly Geneva, haven't changed. It's still the international headquarters for the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, International Committee of the Red Cross. It has representatives of foreign governments and holds embassies and international organizations, civil rights organizations, non-governmental organizations, human rights organizations from around the world in a single city. You've got tremendous flows of capital and money in Zurich. You have strong representation of bilateral international exchanges in Bern. So Switzerland, I would say, is of course, still has an active, at least U.S. Espionage presence. And I think that's true of many other countries as well. And unfortunately, this isn't a question question so much of, does Switzerland need to create much stricter laws, create some sort of broad and extraordinary powers to spy on more people themselves? Because it's not a question of relative power. It's a question of pursuing bad behavior when you have suspicion, reasonable cause to suspect it, and enforcing the rules that are already on the books. Espionage is illegal in Switzerland. You don't need a new law. You don't need a new authority to say that. You simply need to investigate the instances that you find and follow them to their ultimate course and pursue an investigation fairly, without regard to who it is who's accused of the wrongdoing in the first place.
Quand vous étiez agent ici à Genève, est-ce que vous aviez une crainte du contre-espionnage suisse ou bien vous travaillez complètement librement?
No, not at all. The Swiss services were not considered a real significant threat in the same way, for example, the French services were. The French are known for being very sophisticated, very aggressive, and very professional. The Swiss services are also highly competent, highly professional, but they are also small and in many ways co-opted. Switzerland portrays itself as neutral in international relations, and in many cases this is true. Unfortunately, in the context of intelligence, that's not quite the case. I don't want to speak with any specificity to any particular allegation or controversy, because it should not be up to me to decide what information should be public or not public. That's a question for institutions of the press to decide. However, I think it's well established at this point. There have been CIA operations in Switzerland, CIA agents who were involved in weapons of mass destruction cases and things like that, people who were involved in nuclear proliferation, who were involved in extraordinary violations of law in Switzerland, in Germany, and the surrounding regions. And unfortunately, there was political influence in those cases, and it went to the highest levels of government. And this is the reason that representatives of the American government, even when they're violating laws in Switzerland, have a level of comfort that there won't be any consequences, there won't be any repercussions. Because at the end of the day, no matter how serious the crime, no matter how serious the allegation, a government in the host country, Switzerland in this case, but this happens all around the world, it's not a specific criticism of Switzerland, has to be willing to say that this powerful government will be held to account for its actions. And that is a frightening thing to do for a smaller country that's quite dependent on foreign relations. And I think until that dynamic is addressed through Swiss policy or politicians, we're going to see more and more of that in the future. It's the same in the case of, for example, when I applied for asylum throughout Europe. Swiss politicians, if you canvassed them and said, do you think that this particular individual, not necessarily me, but any individual who revealed serious wrongdoing, serious crimes, and the public needed to know about this, should they be entitled to some protection? Most ordinary people, most rank and file politicians would say, yes, of course. If I were Chinese and I were reporting about Chinese violations of Swiss citizens' rights, it would be no question. But if I'm an American and you're asking very senior politicians, they may have different answers.
Quelle est votre situation, Edward Snowden, actuellement? Les États-Unis ont annulé votre passeport, c'est bien ça?
Yes, I was en route to Latin America to seek asylum in Ecuador. But unfortunately, as soon as I departed Hong Kong, the U.S. received notice and they canceled my passport, which locked me in place in Russia. I never chose to be in Russia. It was kind of forced on me by these activities. And while I was in the airport in Russia, I applied for asylum in 21 different countries around the world, the majority of which were in Western and Central Europe. Unfortunately, no European country at all said they were willing to provide asylum. And so I remained.
Quel autre sanctuaire est possible? Vous ne pouvez pas rester indéfiniment en Russie. Quel autre sanctuaire est possible?
Well, it seems quite likely if we're speaking just in practical terms, that I will never be allowed to leave Russia by my government. The United States certainly does not wish to see me travel. It is quite possible, any day, any European government could stand up and say, we're no longer willing to agree to this sort of policy of exile. And I would love to return to a place like Switzerland. Some of my favorite memories, actually, are from Geneva. Even just walking around down there.
Vous faites des heureux dans la salle. Vous savez, pardon, Edouard, un certain nombre de gens aimeraient vous faire venir comme réfugié politique en Suisse. Sérieusement, est-ce que c'est une hypothèse qui est intéressante pour vous? Le fait que ce soit un pays neutre au centre de l'Europe, est-ce que ce serait intéressant?
I do think Switzerland would be a great sort of political option because of their historical neutrality, because of sort of the involvement in the past. It would allow Switzerland to politely assert that neutrality matters, that rules matter, that rights matter, and that the defense of our liberties matter. At the same time, they couldn't be accused of taking some kind of anti-American activity like other governments are commonly accused of. And I think that would be, it would be something that would be acceptable to the United States, despite what they might proclaim publicly, and to other countries around the world. But ultimately, that's not a decision, for me or the American government or anyone else. That's a discussion for the citizens of Switzerland to have with their politicians and the Federal Council.
Barack Obama a dit que vous n'étiez pas patriote. Qu'est-ce que vous lui répondez?
It's okay to have those disagreements. I'm not going to tell the President of the United States what he should or should not think. That's arrogant, and I think unfair. Certainly, he may have a different opinion from where he sits, but now, 2 years on from when those accusations were leveled against me, we can judge things not on the basis of emotions, not on the basis of names, but on facts and on history. He said these things because he said, I had made my country and countries around the world less safe, that I was going to cost lives, that American servicemen were going to die, that I would have blood on my hands. And, if you look back at June 2013, it was a scary time. No one knew what happened. They thought I was a Chinese spy, and they thought I was a Russian spy. God knows what they say about me now, but when we look at it, we can judge those claims and go, in fact, we're safer today than we ever have been before. Rather than having military casualties of the U.S. military increase, they've decreased and are lower now than they were in 2013. We haven't seen, extraordinary attacks go off. In fact, every recent terrorist attack that's occurred, these individuals were known to intelligence services beforehand, and rather than being a question of these mass surveillance programs stopping them, we see that wherever there have been mass surveillance programs, these attacks have gone through frequently because, as it was in the case of Charlie Hebdo in France, they said they didn't have the resources to continue monitoring these individuals. And we have to ask ourselves, why is that? And I would argue, we don't know for sure, and it will take many years before we really know, but mass surveillance programs that monitor all of us electronically are incredibly expensive. They require science and research and very expensive computer-based programs that require changes in law that demand attention from parliamentarians, from lawmakers, from lawyers throughout society to get these laws drafted and passed. And these are resources that could have been applied elsewhere. They could have been applied to the traditional, old-fashioned methods of police investigation that we know do work, that we know do stop terrorist attacks, and that we do know are effective, unlike these unproven methods of mass surveillance. And remember, you don't have to take my word for that. In the wake of 2013, in the United States, the White House, or the president, appointed 2 independent review panels that had full access to secret information, to classified information, who could interview all of the heads of the intelligence services and get the version of the story that they won't tell us, and say, are these programs effective? Are they efficient? And the results of both of these panels found that mass surveillance, despite having occurred for 10 years in the United States, had never stopped a single terrorist attack. So the question is, why do we continue putting money and people and resources into programs that we know are not effective, that we know do not make us safe? And when you look at that allocation of resources, it's possible that they're actually making us less safe.
Est-ce que vous mettez encore de l'espoir en Barack Obama? Il est dans la deuxième partie de son mandat. Certains ont désespéré de lui, d'autres disent il peut encore faire des choses. Est-ce que vous mettez de l'espoir dans votre combat en lui?
I try not to focus on me, because ultimately what happens to me doesn't matter. It sounds callous to say that. But regardless of what you think of me, whether you think I'm, this great hero or whatever, or whether you think I'm a terrible traitor, I was only the mechanism of revelation. Ultimately, the people who have pushed this forward are our institutions of the press, our newspapers, our activists, our lawyers, our ordinary citizens who said that these issues matter, that our rights matter, we need to do something about it. So when we put this in the context of the president, for me, it's not about will he do something about me. It's a question of will he do something about us. The president in the United States today has the power, without any changes in law in the United States, of picking up his pen and ending the program that right now creates records of the phone calls of every American citizen. That's 330 million people whose private records are being intercepted, stored, and analyzed, despite the fact that they're not suspected of any criminal activity. He could end that today. He could end that tomorrow. He could end that next week. And I think, for the benefit of all of us, it would send a moral message, not just to the people of the United States, but the world, to say, we have tried this, we have reviewed it, we have measured these programs, and found they were a mistake. We won't make these mistakes again, and we're swearing off these policies just like we found that torture was an effective policy, just like it was an inexcusable policy, and reminding the world that even if these programs were effective, even if they did stop crimes in some narrow sense, giving up the rights of everyone in society to stop a few rare crimes is not a fair trade-off, and it's not part of the American value system.
Est-ce qu'à votre avis, est-ce que les programmes de surveillance de masse ont été révisés? Est-ce qu'ils ont changé, ou bien est-ce que ce sont uniquement des promesses qui sont déjà passées?
They have been reviewed. They have not been changed in any substantive manner. There have been a few small policy changes where they say, yes, we will continue to collect all of your information. If you're a foreign citizen, you don't have any legal protection that says we're going to spy on you any less. However, when we're publishing reports about what you did, we'll black out your name if it's not important, things like that. So they'll know you work at this company, they'll know what product your company is producing, they'll know who you sell it to. They'll know, for example, who your friends are, who you sleep with, where you go, who you talk to on the phone. But they'll say those aren't the important parts of this report, so we'll just say which parts we're interested in. This is better than nothing, but unfortunately it's still a very serious violation of our rights.
Beaucoup sont frappés en voyant le film à quel point il y a des comparaisons avec des pratiques totalitaires. Est-ce qu'il y a selon vous une vraie tentation totalitaire de la NSA, du système américain?
This is a complicated question because it requires a lot of movements. I think when you take a system of government that begins to think about the ends, the ultimate results of their activities, as opposed to the road they walk to get there, we run a risk of ending up in very bad situations, regardless of the original intention. I don't think the people who work at the National Security Agency are bad people. I don't think they want to hurt anybody. I don't think they want to violate your rights. And I know this for a fact because I was one of them. I sat among them. I talked to them about it. And they had the same concerns that I do and that you do. However, they also think they're powerless to change it because these decisions are happening at a much higher level. And at the same time, the results of these activities are good. You know, they say if we can stop an attack, it's all worth it, even if we haven't stopped an attack on its basis. But this is really the challenge, is recognizing that people with good intentions can do very dangerous things, can do very bad things without realizing it. And it's for this reason that it's so important internationally that we remove it from questions of nationality. We remove it from questions of competition. And we think about not whether or not a particular program is legal, not whether it's lawful, but whether it's right and whether it's moral. And in this context, it doesn't matter whether or not this is lawful any more than it matters whether or not slavery is lawful. We can look at the impact of these activities. We can look at the costs of these activities and say, regardless of what some letters say on a page, these programs are wrong. They need to end.
Qu'est-ce qui est humainement le plus dur pour vous aujourd'hui? Vous êtes en exil, vous subissez une pression incroyable. Qu'est-ce qui est personnellement le plus difficile?
Recognizing that I can't go home again. I mean, exile is an ancient and really sort of reviled circumstance. It's not something that happens too much anymore. And typically these things don't last forever. But increasingly we're seeing cases where if it's a great power who has been embarrassed, they can assert force in sort of new and lasting ways. But as much of a price as I've paid, you know, I can't see my family as regularly as I could. I can't see my friends, my coworkers, my colleagues. I can't do the work that I enjoyed and felt like I could make a difference with. And I can't see my home again. I don't feel like I've lost. I don't feel like, you know, I live in depression. In fact, I'm energized, I'm encouraged, and I look forward to waking up every day. Because despite the things that I've lost, I now have an opportunity to contribute and wake up every day recognizing that whether or not I win or lose, I tried. I tried to make a difference, and in some small way, I think maybe I did.
Il y a ce moment extraordinaire dans la cérémonie des Oscars, il y a ce moment extraordinaire quand quelqu'un fait le jeu de mots entre raison et trahison. Je crois que ça vous a fait rire vous-même. L'humour, ça me frappe chez vous, hein, dans Snowden. Vous arrivez encore à en avoir dans la situation où vous êtes.
Yeah, there were the majority of people who saw the comment felt some sense of outrage about it. They felt it was sort of an unforgivable insult. But for me, seeing it personally, I think we have to keep a sense of humor about these things. And nobody can be beyond criticism. You know, I don't want people to think like they should walk on eggshells around me. I want to be criticized. I want to be scrutinized because that's the standard that everybody who has some voice should have. I don't want you to trust what I say. If I make some allegation about something that's happening, I want you to demand evidence. And when somebody says, you know, I think you're a traitor, I think this was treason, I say, you know, that's okay. My country was born from an act of treason. We were originally a colony of Great Britain, the United Kingdom. And if it wasn't for people who were willing to stand up and break the law, my country and its values would not exist. So there's a famous quotation that says, if this be treason, then let us make the most of it. And I think that's all that needs to be said.
Quel était votre rêve, Edward Snowden? Quand vous êtes entré au service de la CIA, vous saviez bien que vous n'entriez pas au service d'une couronne. Il y avait quand même une motivation, un rêve qui a été déçu visiblement. Qu'est-ce que c'était?
The idea of intelligence is not what it is. Intelligence gathering is not what it is in the movies. You know, it should never be sort of these James Bond fantasies of breaking into buildings and assassinating people, burning down buildings or bases or whatever. Really, it's about protecting societies, protecting civilizations, protecting communities, not by sort of these outrageous acts of criminality, but rather finding the truth and being willing to speak that truth to the most powerful members of your government to ensure that their policies are in line with the facts. And this is really the greatest tragedy of the post-September 11th period, after the terrorist attacks in my country, was the policies of our government in many ways became divorced from facts. We started a war on the basis of false information that the most senior officials in our government knew was false, but they knew it was also persuasive. And when they wanted to start a war, they found that they had a mechanism to do so by misleading the public of my country and misleading the public of societies around the world. And that is something that it is the job and the responsibility of intelligence officers around the world to prevent. So when people ask me, did I sort of go back against the ideas that I held when I first went into the intelligence community, I would say no. In fact, that's precisely the opposite. What I did in 2013 was I stood up for the values of intelligence officers around the world and the mission that we were charged by our countries to perform, which is to tell the truth, despite the costs and despite the risks.
Est-ce qu'une autre vie est possible après tout ça?
I hope so, you tell me.
Laquelle? Quelle vie est possible après une aventure pareille?
For now, I mean, I'm so invested in trying to move forward with the technological community, with colleagues in computer science research, anonymity research, to find methods where we can protect our communications around the world. And when we think about this in legal terms, in lawful terms, it's quite difficult. Because you can pass, for example, the best privacy laws that history has ever seen in Switzerland, or Germany, or France, or Italy. But as soon as your communications cross the border electronically, they're subject to different laws. And those changes in laws will be exploited. The term that I use to describe this is jurisdictional arbitrage. But it doesn't really matter. That the result is that laws can only protect our communications. They can only protect our private lives within the borders of our own countries. If we want to protect the human rights of people, not just within our country, but around the world, protect the rights of people in China, in Africa, in Russia, in Iran, in North Korea, in Latin America, even in the United States, that can only be done if it happens on the level of systems that every country around the world relies on. And so that's what my focus is on today, and I think would be my second act if we were to declare one.
Edward Snowden, si vous êtes réfugié politique en Suisse, qu'est-ce qui vous manque dans la vie quotidienne aujourd'hui? Vous êtes en exil dans la vie normale telle que vous pouviez l'avoir à Genève ou ailleurs. Qu'est-ce qui vous manque aujourd'hui?
You know, there's this incredible atmosphere in Geneva that is, I think, quite unlike many other cities around the world, many other countries around the world, in that there are people of so many conflicting values. There's so much diversity, but they all find ways to put it down and come together, to live together, and to create sort of this thriving interlocked society, where when you're walking around, you know, Lake Geneva and the Fête de Genève or something like that, watching the fireworks, and you look to the people to your left and your right, they're speaking different languages, their skin is different colors, but you can feel that you're all part of the same world. You're all part of the same humanity. And that's something beautiful, and I miss that a lot.
Vous êtes, aux yeux de certains Américains un traître, d'autres vous soutiennent. Vous êtes tellement américain, Edward Snowden. Est-ce que la logique des États-Unis, elle n'est pas forcément impériale? Est-ce qu'il y a une tentation forcément de domination du monde des États-Unis? Ou est-ce que ça peut changer?
I think we're beginning to see a turning away from the idea that the United States should sit on top of the world and dictate the outcome of every decision in every society. Because those are the politics of conflict. And while they may work, while they may be profitable, and while they may be politically beneficial to certain classes of people, to certain members of the elite, they're not good for societies. And I don't mean this in terms of sort of just the international community, because although the world might agree with that, most Americans would not. I think it's bad for Americans as well. Ultimately, if we pursue politics that are not minimizing the level of conflict around the world, but are instead risking conflict by creating muscular, aggressive policy positions to every controversy around the world, that's inevitably going to lead to an increase in violence and an increase in tension that's to nobody's benefit.
Edward Snowden, merci. Vous nous avez accordé déjà plus de temps que ce qui était prévu. Je suis sûr que beaucoup de gens dans la salle auraient envie de faire un vœu pour vous. Qu'est-ce qu'on peut vous souhaiter?
Well, I think for tonight it would just be good evening.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Voilà, merci beaucoup d'avoir suivi